15 seconds.
The meeting can now start. Who's gonna open up?
Mike, you want to start the meeting? You froze. I think
Because,
we start with the pledge, right?
yes, ma'am.
Shall we?
Mhm.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is for all.
Okay, how about the roll call? Roll call? Shall we? Mike Overby. I saw you, Mike. David Hartson. Don Clark.
Here.
Scott Schaefer. Vicky.
Here.
Mark.
Here.
Okay. And Ray, is Ray Honey there?
Not.
No Ray Honey. And then Mike disappeared. He froze and disappeared. But I know he's here. We probably should have a motion to approve today's agenda.
I make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. There's approval of consent agenda. I don't know why. What does that mean?
That's generally where your minutes are contained, is under the consent agenda.
Okay. Okay, so approval, what we need is approval of the last meeting's minutes and also approval of the minutes from October the 1st. So I have sent those out at least twice, maybe 3 times. So I really hope you read them. Do we have an approval of October 1 minutes?
I make approval of October 1 minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then we need approval of November, I think it was 11 or 12. I can't remember the exact date. I don't have it in front of me. The last November meeting we had. Could we have Vicky?
I make approval on the last November meeting we had.
Thank you, Vicky.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
I'll make it easy.
All in
Yeah.
favor? Aye. Okay. I don't know who's in the audience, and I really appreciate knowing who's in the audience. So if anyone speaks from the audience, please say your name. Okay. So shall we go on to business? We need a / processing update. I don't know why, but why don't we do it? It's on there. Is Chief Vance in the audience?
Hello, everyone. Chief Vance speaking. We don't have a cubic meters or cubic yards that we burned. But I can tell you that the crew is making significant progress on reducing the amount of slash inside of the pit burns. They're conducting a burn today, which is a very large burn. Captain Romo gave me the dimensions of 10 by 30 by 15, I believe, which is pretty significant. And there is one very large pile and then one not as large pile remaining, but we fully expect to be able to get through that by next spring.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is Mike Overby. I was online there and all of a sudden I got canceled.
Mike, we've moved on and we just had the / processing update. And so we're going on to number 2 now, the ambassador coordinator report from Lindsay.
Okay, one of the things I needed to add was the minutes, which this new format didn't have that on there. So did you go ahead and cover that and approve the minutes?
We certainly did. And we
Okay,
approved
good.
the agenda too, thanks to Vicky and Dave.
Okay, great. Let's go on to the ambassador coordinator then. I'm on my cell phone now.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, Lindsay?
So just a quick little update on the program. We've kind of got a little bit of a program outline going right now, just trying to figure out where it's going to fit in with the fire department and when we're going to kind of get the ball rolling a little bit more. We're starting on possibly getting our website going, a Facebook page, email list. I'm coming up with an ambassador job description, so pretty much just what our ambassadors are going to be doing when they're volunteering, things like that. Trying to figure out meetings, how they're going to be structured, and how risk assessments are going to look, whether that's just through the ambassador program or through the fire department, things like that. So a couple of goals we have in the next few months are just create that website, get that job description done, and possibly do some more community outreach, things like that. But do y'all have any questions for me?
Thank you, Lindsay.
All right.
Mike, you want to go on to number 3?
Sure. This was an item on the agenda in the past, and it was a grant opportunity for New Mexico Energy Minerals Natural Resource. And we had talked about it being a potential source for funding for a forester to help us with the Defensible Space Ordinance. I wanted to include it on the agenda just because it kind of fell off. So I don't know if Rocky, if you could give us an update if you have one.
I
Rocky?
apologize. I was not listening.
Rocky was handing out paperwork. Sorry.
What's going on?
Can you repeat that, Mike?
Yeah, this grant opportunity that was available, and it didn't have a deadline. It was open for submission, and we had talked in an earlier meeting about needing possible technical assistance from a hired, contract consultant forester to give advice on some of the open issues on the Defensible Space Ordinance. Is there a plan to do that? I don't know I haven't checked back with EMNRD about, is that continuing to be an open grant opportunity? And if so, how much?
Yeah, it does continue to be a continuing grant opportunity. It's the total is, I believe, $60,000. Our thought was to focus it on training, maybe for our ambassador to maybe increase some skills, maybe in the area of forestry. We missed the deadline, but the deadline is every other month.
Okay.
So I believe the next deadline is the end of January for submission.
Are we planning on doing it?
I had not made any plans to do that.
You may not apply for it?
No,
Every
I
other
can't. I just need clear direction from you all or someone if you truly, really want to do this.
Wow.
I guess to that end, we need a purpose and objective if we are going to. That could be one, training could be a subject, but it's pretty open-ended as far as what it would cover if it's related to, fire mitigation, the WUI, and so forth. My understanding.
Mm-hmm. But from looking at the grant, it looked like a lot of things that were included a lot of the things were on the current AIM contract. So it could assist in those areas. Creating seminars for the public, and training, those type of things.
Again, going back and, just looking at the minutes from the last 2 or 3 meetings, there was a discussion about needing to hire a forester, on a contract basis. I just bring that up since it was, never was moved ahead on, as far as I knew. Does the fire chief, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, like this is a Fire Chief Vance, part of that discussion about hiring a forester on a contract basis was in relation to developing the DSO, the Defensible Space Ordinance. I don't know if you guys had something else in mind as to why we would need a forester outside of that context. We did identify, all sources pointed back to Mr. Lindsay, who is here today, and Mary Stuber. And I believe that if the fire department were interested in contracting somebody, we would likely go through the district forestry office and reach out to them. I believe they have Mr. Brian Lindsay and maybe one other forester available for us for contract. But it was in the context of the DSO, to my knowledge.
Yes, it was. That's, and that's when we were talking about the more complex DSO. The one that we're going to be reviewing today has been significantly simplified, and I think that's great. So the question is, is that even something that we need to pursue with a grant, or if it could be funded, at no cost through the state, then obviously why not?
I can say at this point, I feel comfortable that we've reached a point. Mr. Lindsay has consulted us, and I hope he's not expecting a paycheck quite yet, but
I am ambassador volunteer number 1.
So he's been volunteer number 1. He's been a great help, along with a list of other people
Okay.
that I'll mention later. But as far as we stand right here before the meeting, before the presentation of our vision of a DSO, I think we're in good standing with not needing contractual services.
Okay.
But
so
Mike,
that's
why
good.
wouldn't
Yes.
why wouldn't we apply anyway?
Well, for the training element, if we could develop a specific scope, again, scope and more details, and if it could pay for that, I think Rocky is right. We do have funding in the ambassador coordinator.
I don't think I'm on the screen. Well, they don't see me eating.
What?
Ray just joined the call and he's not muted, Martha. That's what happened.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just think that if we could get, 60,000 more for education and outreach to support Lindsay and all that she's doing and the ambassadors that we have, why not apply for it if we can? I mean, I haven't even looked at what the parameters are, but maybe we should put that online and all of us weigh in on that, Mike.
Yes, I would recommend that be done. I know, I could send it out, but I'd like Rocky to send out the grant description to all of the committee members. And since this is an ongoing thing every 2 months, we may crystallize more detail as we move ahead through the year. As far as the need. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's do that. Okay. Let's go on to the biggest and most important item on the agenda is review and comments on the proposed new Defensible Space Ordinance, which I'm hoping, assuming everybody has had a chance to look at it.
Would you like me to share the screen with it?
Sure. Yeah, there's two. Let me just, and Lindsay or Fire Chief, you've got 2 documents here. So, and I think they're excellent at this point. I mean, we're well on the way, I think, much more simpler. But one was the actual DSO itself, and then another document was a phased-in approach, which I think we all were agreeing was a right approach to take. It would be my recommendation, and I'd like anyone else's input, to let's start with the DSO document itself. That's sort of the framework going forward, and then how we implement it. Phased approach probably ought to be after we have a solid set of rules and regulations for the DSO. Any other comments on that thought?
This Fire Chief Vance, if you'll allow me to just to kind of present this, there's a couple of typos that I'm noticing and regretting now. So if Rocky would do me a solid and keep that typo for goals, but Our idea is, this, document that you have in front of you, is, about 2/3 of what we have. We have another, internal document that extends upon this with, how we would deal with, some of the internal processes and flow of work, et cetera. But what you see before you is, this is just generally, I've taken notes through, all of the meetings that I've attended since I was hired on in July. And this was, how I envisioned everything that we've talked about up to this point. So we're projecting a three-phase plan. A lot of this is malleable and is open for discussion, but this is the best that we could come up with. Phase one, obviously they're outlined. You can see that in front of you. Phase two, phase three. The consensus of what I've heard is maybe in the beginning years, have a DSO that is not necessarily punitive and we don't find anybody for, and eventually move into a progression to where maybe we can start instilling fines. What those fines would be up to the municipality and not to the fire department. Enforcement and who would actually police that and so forth would also be up to the village, perhaps our code enforcement person or someone else. I do have an addition to the document I have in front of me that I made this morning. I apologize, it's not on there. But if you follow phase 1 to 2 years, policy, goals, evaluation, and process, I have one more to add to that, and I'll share that with the group after this meeting. And that is the implementation / penalties / enforcement phase. My first recommendation is that we would implement this policy on April 1st of 2025. You all would come up with some fine number. We have determined some limits that forgive me if I'm misspeaking, but I believe the maximum penalty allowable by the village in any circumstance, to my understanding, is 6 months in jail or some 30 days in jail, maybe. I think it's 30 days in jails. And
but we're not talking about penalties.
No.
We're not talking about penalties on this first phase at all.
Right, and that's what I just mentioned, that I have one addition to that, and I apologize for not adding that before this meeting. I just added it on this morning. But it was mentioned to me that we should probably state what the fine eventually will be so that people are not taken by surprise. And I'm not proposing that we have any jail time or any $500 maximum fine. I'm just simply stating that what the limitations to those would be. My idea would be much lower than that.
Good.
God.
Yeah, I'm just trying to define our bookends here. What would the maximum penalty allowable to
But
be?
you think that's something that we ought to work on, is trying to determine what a penalty would be 5 years down the line.
And so what we had discussed before is if we implement a DSO, we ask for people to comply within certain limits, and we define what those parameters are. The first year, there wouldn't be any type of, we would waive that for the 2025 season. And hopefully by then we have our ambassador program spooled up. We could do some site visits and say, this is what we would recommend for your particular location. XYZ will come back in 30 days, reevaluate. And at that point, see if, check for compliance for that DSO. And then beyond that, then maybe there would be a 30, a 60, a 90-day reminder. You still haven't complied with our recommendations or whatever. And then maybe from there on, you guys can decide what the penalties would be. And I don't know how that's going to be assessed or enforced.
We wouldn't decide, but we could recommend, but we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I could, and I apologize, just
No.
for a second. As it relates to municipal fines and fees, the process for this year has been to not have those numbers hard coded in the municipal ordinance itself, but to reference fines in the ordinance and then pass the amounts via resolution. That way, if you need to go change your fees or fines, you don't have to craft an entirely new ordinance that requires all of the public notice and public readings. So I think it's fine to have sections in here that would reference future fining, but I don't believe that those actual fine amounts would be in the ordinance itself. And this is just from a logistics of how ordinances become law perspective. So I see the wisdom, I guess, of saying, hey, there will be fining in here at a date to be decided upon later, and letting people know that, hey, for the first year, there will be no finding, or for the first, whatever is decided, it's not going to instantly have the enforcement, but hinting it in the future, this will become something the village is looking to enforce more stringently.
Understood. If I could make some language changes in that to be fines, and that there could be potential fines imposed, and that the resolution would determine the fine amounts.
Yeah.
Moving on to phase 2 and phase 3, you know, all of those are successive things that we would be looking at as far as I'd like to think that this is comprehensive as far as how we would approach it from a slash and program handling. There are notes at the bottom, how we're initially going to approach it the first year. And then after that first year, we'll have a lot more data points to be able to make decisions on whether we need to hire more slash people, or we need to do process slash in some different type of way, hauling it off and making provisions so that if we are overwhelmed, if we get the type of response that some of us project that we will get, that we'll have a plan in place to be able to handle that slash intake. So that is basically our phased approach to that. Any questions on how we plan on phasing in the DSO?
I've got a kind of a comment or a question. And
This is Don
Can-
Clark.
okay,
I have one comment.
Yes, sir.
As long as crowns touching is an issue, the thing is not practical. Because if you put in that crowns touching language, that means thousands of trees, not hundreds, but thousands would have to be removed. And that's just totally out of the question.
could I suggest, that's a good point, Tom, Don, and when we get into the actual DSO wording, let's bring that up again.
So if I can respond to that, if you don't mind, Don, I want to also point out the scope of this DSO is to evaluate residential properties. And the focus is to evaluate residential properties. And so we're not talking about this from a forestry standpoint outside the village limits or outside of those residential limits. If you do look at some of those recommendations, when we do get into the DSO proper, they are defined within a radius of a home. And so we're not talking about the hundreds of thousands of acres within the Angel Fire village limits. We're speaking directly to the residential properties and the proximity to homes. So our idea here with the original defensible space ordinance is to focus small on something that's palatable for us to be able to determine an ordinance for the fire protection of residences, and to leave the forestry protection and outside the forestry limits for another day.
Okay, can you hear me? I don't know if my phone is working with this. Can you hear me there, Chief?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Even
Yes.
if you have the restriction on home lots with homes on it, you still get involved in having to remove many trees.
Don, we're going to talk about this. Mike's trying to make a point first on the project outline, then we can get into,
Yeah,
as the
that's good.
chief said, we can get into that.
Yeah, we're going to go over that point by point. A high level comment, whether I think it belongs in this document clearly, and that is something we've talked about before, and that is kind of a scope statement, such as, does this apply only to single family homes and structures, or does it also apply to multifamily, such as condos, townhouses, and so forth? As everyone knows, if you've been up into the condo area next to the ski resort, because of the age of those, you're going to be cutting down, a whole bunch of trees that are within 5 to 10 feet. So, I mean, that's just a scope statement. Maybe it's a phase 2 or 3 that apply to those larger structures, or maybe not phase 1.
I don't have a direct answer for that. I can only speak to my mindset when I was approaching this document, and that was for the single family home, the single home, and I was not focused on
Yes.
commercial buildings or otherwise.
Well, I think that, I mean, it's going to be a question. I mean, obviously, so
Yeah,
in some way,
the-
it needs to be covered, as well as, I mean, it's not just the home, but there's a lot of people that have separate garages, gazebos, other structures in a single family home lot. So,
Yeah, I think
that's,
everything that's addressed for single family home lot, garages and outbuildings is relatively covered in this.
okay,
The point that I would like to make about that is the concern that I have heard the most is to address the issuability of homeowners insurance and the people's lack of ability to get homeowners insurance and their requirement to have some sort of documentation from the fire department to say that we have complied with our local defensible space ordinance, and here's our certificate, and may you please insure us. So that was the
Yes,
focus of this original, and so anything beyond that, I agree with your sentiment that we could move on to phases 2 and 3.
yeah, I would agree with that. And, it just needs to be defined so people have a clear understanding. That's good. Okay, any other general comments about I mean, we could wordsmith the phasing, but it generally, in my mind, the approach that I understood we were going to try to take. Anybody have any other comments about that outline document in general? Okay. I guess it's assumed, and I don't see it in here, but it's assumed, clarify this, that this current process of picking up slash from a homeowner's road will be continuing in all phases. And maybe there already is in a permit document that I thought existed before, how a homeowner is to do that. And we don't need to spell that out. It'll be a part of this overall document. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are approaching this from the standpoint that all current operations as we currently have in place will remain in place throughout this, and did not want to get into the weeds about how we were going to process the slash and so forth. We feel like we have a good grip on that and are taking steps to address all of that.
Okay.
I did also want to mention, I forgot to mention before in our slash report that Kurt Epler had addressed the SWIP. They have a SWIP meeting coming, or SWIP inspection coming up here pretty soon this week. And they've already dug a large pit in our yard, and it allowed for the runoff to slowly seep into the ground. And they addressed some of the concerns that they had before, as well as the, what do you call them, Kurt? The water socks.
Okay.
The wattles and BMPs and that. And so we've increased our ability to be able to process that slash. Our next step is to be able to move the ash pit that we currently have and be able to process that as well. But we're addressing all of those concerns on all fronts, but just wanted to stick to the focus project of the DSO for this purpose.
Okay, well, I would like to suggest we move into the actual second document, the DSO, perhaps going through it section by section.
Oh, Jesus.
If anyone has another suggestion, then let me know. But could we start?
I don't think we need to read through every section, but I think we need to ask for
questions
section by section.
Okay, well, let's do that. Let's,
just, I'm sure most of us have read it, right?
Okay, well, yes, you're right. We don't need to read it. You're right. But let's take it section by section. And if anybody has any questions or comments.
I may be able to drive this a little bit. On the section 1 purpose, Lindsay and I were coming up with some of the language for that, and that's kind of like the generic version that we came up with in the black writing. What she had found from the Santa Fe Defensible Space Ordinance is written in blue there. I felt that that was pretty decent language that we could modify. If you guys liked A or B example or some modification or marriage of those two statements, we could do something like that. But I felt like you guys may have a better perspective to define the overall encompassing purpose, and maybe you guys want to contribute to that.
Okay,
I think we could marry that and add some of that. That's, I think the Santa Fe DSO, that little paragraph there is really well written.
could I
So
ask a question that maybe doesn't need to be asked? I know I don't know the definitions and so forth. How does the village, in terms of a code, if there is one like this, a wood roof? I know, I don't think you can build one with now, initially, but maybe you can, and maybe there are others that already exist that need to be replaced. That's a very high level initial, clarification.
What are
I
you talking
believe
about,
it's
Mike?
actually-
I don't.
Wood roofs.
I
Um,
believe that's already in the municipal code that cedar shake shingle roofs are not allowed as new installs anymore. I know that there was one that just came off a year or so ago and was replaced with metal. I don't think you'll see anybody trying to put a cedar shake back. At this
No,
point.
I just didn't know if that for existing, is there a requirement? Should there be a requirement that those be replaced if they
There is
exist?
a section in the municipal code as it relates to color and type of roof. Metal silver roofs are also not allowed per village regs. Doesn't mean there aren't some out there. The ones that exist, that as long as they existed before the ordinance date, are grandfathered in, but they won't be able to get a permit to replace the roof of like kind or color that's not conforming anymore. So it's not that we would go make someone replace, it's grandfathered in, but at such time as they do go to replace that roof, it won't be wood any longer.
And Mr. Rick Smith is in the crowd too and wishes to address that as well.
Okay,
Your current ordinances require Class A roofing materials, which includes asphalt, shingles, metal, tile, anything like that. Shake shingles and anything flammable is not Class A. So that's already covered in your current ordinance. Not the
Okay.
different ordinance, building code.
okay, so
Lindsay
we don't
Lindsay
need to
Reed has a
include anything about a wood roof, existing wood roofs, other than what is already in the code. Okay, is that what I'm hearing?
Lindsay Reed has a comment as well.
Also, if we do like marry the verbiage from like A and B there, the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface Code, also like kind of addresses stuff like that as well. Which was used to write the DSO.
So we could reference, if we want to merge those two together, purpose and the other one quoted from Santa Fe, we could also reference the WUI documents as well.
Okay. So section 3.1, intermediate zone. Questions or comments?
So I have a question, and I'll use my property as an example. I know one of the concerns we've heard before is there are several homes where they've been on the site for 20, 30 years. When they sited the home, they built the deck around this beautiful mature tree that's there. My home is an example of this. There's a tree in the middle of a deck. The way I'm reading this now, I could be allowed to keep that tree that is within that immediate zone, but then the zone extends further because of that existence of the tree. I didn't see anything in here that talks about if you're gonna have a tree in that immediate zone, any requirements for the ladder fuels on that tree. Is that something that needs to be added? If that's going to be okay, you can keep your precious tree. And I'm not saying I'm gonna, but
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of other, homeowners coming up against this situation. If they're just desperate to keep that tree, the DSO does allow them to do that with the extension of the zone to go further, another 5 feet out. But I think any trees in that zone, there should be some language on the ladder fuels. Is that?
Yeah. I'm gonna refer to Lindsay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of, that's definitely something that we can tweak to be more understood, I guess. But basically, so all of the mitigation that you do within that immediate zone, right? Extends to that tree, so that also includes like the ladder fields that you're not allowed to have there just in general anyway. So basically, say that that tree is like right there at 4 feet, right? It's gonna extend 5 feet past that tree. You have to do the exact same mitigation that you did in those 4 feet beforehand, out from that, where that tree is.
Right.
So it should, I mean, I guess verbiage wise, I guess it doesn't make as much sense.
So anytime you have ladder fields within the immediate zone, they would extend out 5 feet beyond that
Right.
to extend that zone out, and so.
Yeah,
does
you're
that
not supposed to
that-
have any water fields in that zone anyway.
Do you think there needs to be some language to?
Well,
other in some type of.
if you're gonna keep a tree, because the way I read it, and I read it yesterday and I read it again this morning. I totally understood that this will extend my immediate zone. I just think, because I don't know, it's probably somewhere down in here, but if you're gonna keep a tree in that immediate zone, the ladder fuels are gonna have to go up to what height? In other words, how much limbing out am I gonna have to do to get that tree to be acceptable in the immediate zone?
Yeah, so we'll look at
The
that
other
clause.
thing you guys got to take into consideration, insurance companies will come in and they will tell the people to cut the tree. Because it's too close to the house.
Yeah, so, as far as that goes, we can't, in my opinion, we can't write something that's gonna appease everybody. What we can do is provide them with documentation of what we do assess and the standards that we uphold within our village. And, I think that, as a triage type of, mentality will do the most good for the most people, and we'll deal with those one-off situations as they come up. I hate for small things like that, what if, examples to get in the way of, a lot of progress that we've made.
Yes, absolutely. We can't do that.
Okay, I have a question about materials, and I'm just looking at this as I've compared it to other, DSOs. Move flammable materials such as firewood away from the exterior walls of the home. So if there is a wooden deck that the firewood is on, is that okay? To me, it wouldn't be okay, but maybe that's the way you had intended it to be, as opposed to so many feet away from the structure.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Firewood.
go ahead and let Lindsay speak to that effect as well.
Yeah, so I think it's also included, I'm not exactly sure what section it's in, but that's definitely not possible. That we don't want firewood within that immediate zone, including if it's on like a wood deck. We definitely don't want firewood like on wood decks just in general.
Yeah.
We put like wood storage clause in there so that we have revised since, so the like cord storage is a little bit different than the document that you have at the moment. But yeah, we don't want firewood within that immediate zone.
I guess the another thought is how a maximum amount, clearly you don't want a cord of wood on your wooden deck, but how many people, keep some wood?
Mike, it's pretty clear in 4.1. I mean, it is clarified.
Okay, maybe look at 4.1.
4.1 storage restrictions, and it gives you a time, during the fire season. And we've talked about this before, the fire retardant covers. I mean, they work. That's what I have. I'm using those, and
So the insurance companies, the people I've talked to that have been, the enforcement is 100 feet, minimum 100 feet from the house with your wood storage. So whether or not we enforce that or not, that's what the insurance companies are actively enforcing.
Do you know the name?
I have
These companies?
wood, and I only do it in the wintertime, stacked on my deck for when it's a pure whiteout and I can't make it to the wood pile.
yes, exactly. I mean,
And then by the time spring comes, I don't have a piece of wood on my deck.
Exactly. I mean, it's not reasonable to say that if we heat our house with wood, and it's not reasonable for me to go out 100 feet in the snow and try to get wood back in the house when we use it every day.
Yes, that's the whole point I'm bringing up.
So,
I mean,
so
it is
again,
the point. It is the point. And I think firewood storage 4.1 clarifies that yes, if you're storing firewood in the safest way possible with a cover or an enclosure, then, I mean, it's just not reasonable in a mountain community to not have firewood during the cold season.
And
So
if it's a pure whiteout and you can't even see your wood pile,
right.
at least you
Again,
got
if
wood
I
on the
may
deck you
interrupt.
can use.
So
If I
one
may interrupt
cord.
to keep us focused on the task at hand, our intent is to identify a minimum standard of what we recommend and ask people to comply with that. And if you have an insurance company that has a greater standard, you have two choices: either to comply to that standard to keep your insurance under that company, or to look for another insurance
Okay.
company. And that would be between you and your insurance
Okay.
company.
Can I ask about the firewood storage? You said it had been updated. It says 1 cord.
Yeah, it's updated to 1.
How many? I burned 6 cords a winter.
Yeah.
I burned 7.
We're just trying to find what's reasonable.
I think my concern is that someone in Santa Fe that has natural gas that doesn't burn wood for heat came up with that 1 cord number.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're definitely, that's been brought up already, and that's something that we're revising as well.
My question is, whether the intent is to have 1 cord stored together all in one bulk, so it remains 1 thermal mass, or if the cords would need to be separated, so opposed to being a large pile.
So generally, I have cut my own wood and I have bought my own wood. I lay out pallets to get it up off the ground. I'm not separating it out into, I have 1 giant wood pile. Now it is stacked, it is not piled, because I have hardwood on one side and softwood on the other side. But, before I put new windows in, I was burning 8 to 10 cords, depending upon the winter that would go. So most people are not gonna separate out. When I buy wood now, it's either coming in on a dump trailer, and so it's getting dumped in one place. And fortunately, I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old to stack it in another place. But most people are either centralizing it in one area. I tarp it. I know some people have wood sheds or garages that they're gonna locate this in. But I would echo what the committee says. It is very common to have a large main pile of wood, and then I generally keep a rick under cover on the back of my house, because I've got to be able to get out there and, burn a week's worth of wood without having to shovel it off every week.
So we're open to suggestions for language for that, and we're more than willing to modify that.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, it's more so just like, but May 1st to August 31st, how much wood are you storing,
There's
right?
the season, right?
It's the season, so I feel like we're gonna be more accommodating during the winter time. We're also
just think
talking about
it's-
maybe doing certain things for like accommodations for older people who can't go out to that giant wood stack,
That's me.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you. I
Okay.
appreciate that. Taking care of me. But in this community, I think it's important. I know we're spending time on firewood storage, but I think it's important because if we want our community to buy into this, we really do need to be clear about some of this, because some people, just like I did, can get kind of up in arms about their firewood.
Yeah.
I concur. I
Okay.
think the first thing that has to happen is emphasize the seasonal nature of the risk. Okay?
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been a fire from like November 1st through May
April.
1st,
Yeah. April, May.
because people had wood stacked close to the house. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I've heard that Lindsay's going to take some steps to modify that language.
I think you got to be.
We can move on.
Let's move
I've
on.
taken a note of that. If we'll scroll up a little bit, Rocky, we had one The slope regulations, Mary, would you mind speaking to that? We have been talking at length with Rick Smith and Mary Stuber about some sort of language that could help us identify those threats. Slope regulations can be pretty tricky depending on the terrain. So I'm going to ask Mary make a comment on that and her recommendations for that.
Okay, I'm also gonna, hi, I'm Mary Stuber, and I'm the district forester with the state of New Mexico with the office there at Ute Park. I have two concerns with the extended zone and a little bit of a concern with the intermediate zone, both from a slope perspective as well as from the vegetation thinning guidelines. And so I think the vegetation thinning guidelines are really good for a good portion of Angel Fire. But when we get up into that 10,000 foot area up above where we have mostly spruce and fir, you're gonna see a lot of blowdown if you thin according to these specifications.
Too aggressively in other words.
The trees are very shallow rooted and they depend on each other. And so what's better is to think about a separate vegetation thinning guideline for people living in spruce fir and recommend, you know, what we would call in a forestry standpoint, a patch cut. But let's go ahead and just cut out the majority of the trees unless there is some indication that the tree is wind firm, such as it being a limber pine or a Douglas fir or some other indication that it was open grown. So unless there is some indication that the tree is wind firm, to just go ahead and extend that intermediate zone as more of the guidelines for the 5 foot zone in that area. Otherwise, you're just gonna be creating more fuel on the ground and a risk to the houses with trees falling over. And you don't wanna be responsible for, well, they told me I had to cut my trees. So that's just one point on the vegetation thinning. I think what will really help the big picture, the landscape scale picture, is if you can think about creating fuel breaks up in that high country, where they are patch cuts and places where you can have strategic, you know, operational places where you know you're going to be able to stop fires and keep them small and think about the big picture. And a lot of that can be done by your evacuation routes with your roads and stuff, and having you know, more clearing along the road so that people can get out safely. But those roads can also be used for suppression points. But that's just one point on the vegetation thing. On the slope, a lot of the slope thought on fire is the location of the house in relationship to the slope. So it's, you know, we tend to think that the big issue is where you have the flame coming up the mountain, preheating the house that is above it. So you probably want to indicate, you know, that your slope regulations apply on those slopes below the house. Slopes above the house are less of an issue. And then we have a lot of calculations where we can adjust for slope and limiting distance, but I think what the direction you're going with a group, you know, if the slope is in this class, go this much extra. Typically what we see is about a double the size. So we talk about the extended zone being 100 feet. On steep slope, it's 200 feet. So, you know, I think these numbers are a little conservative up here. For 30 feet on your steeper slopes should be more like 100 feet. And I think that there's some, you know, when you asked me for limiting distances, I was thinking more of some of the forestry applications, but I think in our fire handbooks, we can come up with a table that would help on this, because we make a slope adjustment when we're preparing safety zones for firefighters. And so we can pull right out of the safety zone stuff some numbers that would help here.
If I could make a suggestion, we're running tight on time. We have a hard out council meeting tonight. One of the other things I've seen my other committees do, if this committee is willing, is if you have specific feedback, if we could do that via email. Chief, would you prefer if that came to you or came to Lindsay?
Send it to Lindsay and CC me, please.
So did everyone on the committee on the call hear that?
Yes.
So we
Yes.
can send in ideas and edits to Lindsay.
Questions? Mhm.
Yes, and let's make sure before we have our next meeting that we have kind of a stop work, that we're all working on the same document, before the meeting comes up. We do have a little time left, and I do want to get back to Don's question, because I had the
Yes.
same one about the crowns. But in the interest of time, if there's no other questions, can we have the crown discussion? Don, are you still on?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I
Okay.
knew that was gonna be your question as I read through, so, this is specifically, it's in the, hold on, let me find it, not the intermediate.
It's on page 5, 3.2. Tree spacing.
Vegetation thinning,
Yeah,
remove all dead plant material, dead trees and small conifers growing, between, mature trees. Maintain at least 12 feet of spacing between the canopy of trees. They're 30 to 60 feet from the home, and at least 6 feet for trees that are 60 to 100 feet. This should increase with slope. So in the intermediate, the 30 to 60 foot range, we're looking for 12-foot spacing between canopies. And I think Don's concern, and I share it, is how many volumes of tree removals that's gonna lead to.
That seems
go back up.
impossible.
Go back up to 3.2, tree spacing. Maintain at least 18 foot of space between the crowns.
And so that would be in the 5 to 30 feet zone. It's 12 feet in the 30 to 60.
Right.
So it gets, the spacing is allowable closer as you get further out from the home. So in that 0 to 30 feet, you're talking about an 18-foot distance between crowns.
I mean, wow, I'm looking out my window and I just don't see how, I don't see how I could.
I think that's too aggressive.
Yes.
Is that, can we,
I
is
think-
there,
I
where does that
think,
number come from?
It's based on science.
Yeah.
Rick Smith is gonna address that. He helped us out a little bit with the links on this portion.
So all these numbers are based on some practical research that we were discussing prior to the meeting. 25, 30 years ago, and since then, they did a lot of practical studies. Would you call it a study? Anyway, they built houses inside of giant warehouses and then showered them with embers to see what caused them to catch on fire. And then they also did some studies where they went up to Canada, because the United States would allow this to happen, built houses in the middle of nowhere, and then started gigantic forest fires using helicopters and aerial ignitions to see at what point these houses would catch on fire. That 30-foot spacing in the intermediate zone, that spacing is intended to significantly moderate the fire behavior so that you're not getting intense flames within 30 feet of the house to create enough radiant heat to cause the house to burn down. So it's all science-based. You don't have to like it, but your realtor probably did not tell you this when you bought your house up here, but purchasing a house in a fire-adapted ecosystem, especially an ecosystem that is frequent fire, such as the ponderosa pine and dry mixed conifer, there is an implicit contract between you and the landscape that you're gonna have to be willing to live with fire. So if you're not willing to live with that 18-foot spacing in the intermediate zone, maybe this isn't the place for your house.
Are you talking about crown to crown? I mean, 18
Yes.
feet. trunk to trunk, but are you talking about crown to crown and even with aspen? I mean, every tree?
Generally, we don't apply these regulations to aspens.
Oh,
Generally it's conifers.
good.
And, it varies based on species. Some species are more flammable than others. But anyway, you don't have to like the answer, but it's science-based and it is what it is.
Well, and yep.
Well, if you
A lot
read,
of the-
Mary Stuber.
This is Mary speaking again. A lot of the research that is coming out where we look at where fires burned in recent history, where we have had these treatments, one of the lessons learned is it almost doesn't matter if they're 18 feet between crowns or 25 feet between crowns. If they're evenly spaced and you have the wind blowing the fire through there, we're still losing houses. What we have seen practically on the ground is those treatments where there are actual openings in the forest as well as the spacing. So I'm kind of in favor of saying cut even more trees, because where we have the openings, that's where the fire can get on the ground and the firefighters have a chance to get it out and control it. And if you have evenly spaced trees, you can get winds that are just gonna push, it's still fuel, it's still contiguous fuel. So we're actually maybe going to see some shift in our recommendations, not to have it evenly spaced, but to have, pretty good sized openings between these spaced trees.
I'm just gonna add a quick comment that I learned from Rick Smith before. Keep in mind, we're looking at this from a firefighting perspective. The way that most fires start is they start on the ground. They find some fuel that's a little bit higher, and then they reach up into the trees, and then before you know it, they're into the crowns, and it runs across the crowns. The way that we fight the fire is to try to reverse that process and get it down on the ground. And so the way that we can do that is to space the fuel out further apart. So keep in mind that, while you may be looking outside of your window and see crowns that are touching, I would just like to challenge that, take a look at 30 feet around your house and how many trees around your house within a 30-foot radius. And that's kind of what we're talking about, those zones, and up to 200 feet, granted, if you are on a steep slope. But even 200 feet around your home, how many trees are we actually talking about? Again, we're not talking about the forestry. We're not talking about outside. We're talking about the defensible space ordinance around your home in a small radius.
Yeah.
Rick, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, so to Mary's comments about gaps and clumps of trees, and then also the different forest types, it took me a while, but I sent Lindsay and Chief Vance some suggestions on the defensible space ordinance that kind of incorporate some of this new knowledge and nuance in dealing with the forest types and incorporating that into defensible space.
I would suggest that we add the species distinctions.
Yes.
Just particularly if you have somebody who bought a home in the middle of an aspen grove and we're gonna ask them to cut 80% of their aspen grove down, somebody's gonna tell us exactly what they think of us.
Yeah.
I think there is one very important point that we learned from Dick Smith in the Ruidoso fire this year, as we talked about the structures that got burned within the city limits, and that is that it's kind of that intermediate zone that if there were, lateral fuels or, as it's described here, prune trees up to 6 to 10 feet from the ground, if you keep it on the ground, you're not, as he described, you're almost winning the war. It takes a huge, crown fire with a lot of wind, to get up into the trees within Angel Fire, but it could happen. Probability is low, but as far as saving structures, I think that's kind of what I heard is the high priority item. And that could be, you take very nice but old Colorado blue spruce. It's not going to look real good if you trim it up 6 feet from the ground. And that's what
I'll
you're.
just add in one more comment. Again, in that internal document that we have the checklists. And many of the checklists that the individuals going out, like Miss Reed, if she goes out to your property and evaluates that, some of that is more specific in the checklist. And she will make determinations on that. But I do see the brilliance in adding in the species specific to the DSOs so that people have a better understanding of that. At the end of the day, we just hope that this gives some general guidelines that people can follow and then ask for an evaluation.
Yep.
And at that point, we would send somebody out, either Captain Romo or Lindsay or myself or someone to go out to do the evaluation and talk about the items specific to your lot and your concerns.
You know, Chief Vance and Lindsay and all of you who have worked on this, who are out there in the audience, thank you. I mean, I really like this. I like what you've given us. It's really easy to read and it does allow for the flexibility that we have to have. We just want to make sure that when we present this to the community, that, I mean, these questions will come up. It will be nitpicked. And so, you know, that's why we're nitpicking it right now. You know, we want to be able to support this document and feel confident about it. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for what you've done.
I appreciate that. We had 3 weeks to work on this since our last meeting, maybe 4 weeks. We had this ready and sent out to everybody in 3 weeks. And I feel that the few comments that were made it's actually a pretty good grade. I think we got about an 80% on this one. And so we'll go back to the drawing board and we'll try to massage this language a little bit. I use Microsoft 365, so I'll add everybody, share this document with everybody that's on the council and present. If anybody wants me to add them to that list for that document, feel free to leave me your email address. And if you are not able to open that document, let me know and I'll download a copy and send it to you directly.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I think that was a very good comment there, Martha. So at that point, let's adjourn the meeting here at 5:01. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you all.
thank you.